Welcome to Athar's Garage. In this video, I'll be working on the Yokomo RD 1.0, step 16 and 17, the shock assembly and installation. So let's get started. So for steps 16 and 17, we're going to need bag number 10, as well as some parts from bag number 1. So let's go ahead and get these opened up. All right, so our seals are in this bag. You're going to have two sets of O-rings. You're going to have these black O-rings, which I believe are going to be used to mount the shocks at the upper locations, and I'll show you that later. So just take note of that. The black O-rings are not used to actually seal anything. They're just going to be used to mount the shocks. And then the white, clearish looking O-rings are going to be used as the seals themselves. It looks like the shock pistons are on this parts tree, and there's only one size. So we're going to get all of these off the parts tree, and then we'll continue. Actually, what I'm going to do, since all the shocks are going to be the same, the only thing that's going to be different is the spring cup and the spring front and rear. So I'm just going to build one shock, show y'all how to do it, and then build the other three quickly so y'all aren't watching for too long. All right, so all the shock shafts are the same length. We're going to install one of the E-rings on the lower slot first. Then we're going to install the piston, and the piston has a channel on the bottom side. It doesn't show that facing up, so we're going to face that down, and then we're going to go ahead and install another E-clip on top. All right, now we can grab one of our shock bodies and looks like there's some flashing on the bottom here, and that might prevent that shock cap from sitting flush. So I'm just going to go ahead and trim some of that flashing. So we can go ahead and install the adjusting nut. Make sure that this lip is facing the bottom of the shock. That's where the spring is going to sit on. So threads on nice and smooth. Just be careful that you don't cross thread it. All right. Now we can get our spacers off the parts tree. Looks like we have this spacer here that we're going to be using. As well as a 1/2 mil spacer that came in the seal bag. So just take note of that. There are two different types of spacers that are being shown on this parts tree. So we don't want to use this one. We want to use this one instead. That's what's being shown in the manual. All right, so I'm going to add a little bit of shock O-ring grease. This is the racing one. You can additionally use the blue grease that comes from ProTech. So this is how we're going to install it. We're going to put a little bit of grease on the O-ring. We're going to install the O-ring first. Then we're going to install the 1/2 mil spacer, which is this right here. Came in the seal bag. Then we're going to install it's called the O-ring collar, and make sure you install the larger diameter facing up. So we're going to face this side up, just like so. Then now we can install the O-ring cap. You don't want to tighten too much because it is plastic. You can damage the thread. So once you feel it shoulder up, it's pretty good. Now we can go ahead and install our shock shaft and piston. So I like to rotate it a little bit as I'm installing it. All right, there we go. Now we can install our shock end, so we can get that off the parts tree. So it shows that we want 10 millimeters of stroke. Okay, got 10 millimeters of stroke. So now we can grab a shock stand and install our shock oil. Looks like the shock oil is in bag number 14. So a very light shock oil. I don't think it says 50. I think it's 50 CST. As you see, is very fluid. So just gonna go ahead and fill it up. And I'm just gonna stroke it a few times to get all the air bubbles out. All right, so now I'm gonna let that sit and make sure all the air bubbles come out. And while I do that, I'm gonna go ahead and build the other ones. And once I finish building the rest of them and the air is bled out, I'll show you how to install the bladder and the cap and everything else. So I'm gonna go ahead and speed this up so it doesn't take too long for you guys. All right, so all the shocks are built. We're pretty much just waiting for the air to come out of the fluid. It's nice that they included an extra E-ring. Those have a tendency to fly across the room if they're not put on just perfectly. So now what we can do is we can grab the shock cap and cap nut off the parts tree and trim those while we wait for the air to escape the shocks. All right, now these are ready. Now we can complete the assembly of the shocks. So we're going to fill up the shocks to the top, and make sure you have a microfiber towel ready because this will get messy. Now it looks like we're gonna have some rebound built in to the shock. Usually in this part you want to compress the shock and then install the bladder or the diaphragm, but here it's showing to install the diaphragm with the shock completely extended. So just take note of that. So we're going to install the bladder and you'll have a lot of excess flowing out the sides, which is okay. Then you're going to install the shock cap on top, and then the cap nut. And make sure you don't cross thread it. And once you feel that cap nut shoulder up, it's good. You don't want to keep tightening down because it is a plastic body and you'll strip out the threads. So that's basically it. You see that it has rebound built into the shock, and I think that's what they want for the drift car. So there we go. So we'll do that to the rest of them, and then we'll move on to installing the springs and spring cups. All right, all the shocks are built. Now we need to grab the spring cups from bag 1. They're 2 offsets. So there is the front is going to use the smaller offset, and the rear is going to use the larger offset. So just take note of that. All right, so now we have our springs. It looks like the front springs have less coils than the rear. So this is the front spring here, and this is the rear spring. So we can install the front spring with the smaller of the spring cups. So that's our front shock. And for the rear shock, we're going to have the spring with has more coils, along with the larger of the spring cups. And there we go. So that's what the rear shock looks like, and the front shock. So now we can go ahead and install these onto the chassis. So basically we're going to pop shock end onto the ball studs, and they only pop on one way. And then for the top, we're going to slide on the shock cap, and then we're going to install this black O-ring into the groove, and that's going to hold the shock into place, just like so. Pretty nifty way that they're doing it, rather than using a nut. And we're going to do the same thing for the rear. Basically pop on the bottom, and then we're going to install the O-ring onto the top. All right, and that's on. So that's it for steps 16 and 17, the shock assembly and installation. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe if you did. Let me know down in the comments if you had any questions or tips. I'd love to hear them. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next one.